So I am really pleased to introduce the next speaker. I know him for many years. He's a member of the China Food Safety Initiative. He's, he's a supply chain food safety and quality assurance director with Tyson. He knows everything about food safety because, he's a food safety professional, and on top of that, he's a father of a newborn baby. And you know what traceability, what food safety, credibility means, because as a father now, when he buy baby milk, he look at everything, and my strong advice is to buy, Dumex, I mean, Danone brand for his baby. So, I'm kidding. So, Matthew, thank you for coming, and I am sure that you're going to provide relevant information to the crowd. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yves. And we absolutely do buy Danone. Okay, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be in here today and speak with you. My talk today, we've gone through some of these topics which are very high tech, and I'm going to bring it down a little bit to a little bit more low tech. I think that one of the people that I admire in this world is Temple Grandin, who is an animal welfare expert. And I was watching a talk with her one time, and she came in and she said, she designs a lot of systems around animal welfare for companies. And a lot of these companies will come in and they'll use these CAD systems to design new systems that for handling beef, handling cows, handling pork, swine, handling chickens. And she always said that if you can't draw it out with your own hand, you're never going to have the grasp of that system as you would if you could. So if you just go straight to AutoCAD and you never learn how to draw these systems out by hand, then you're never going to be as effective as if you could draw them out by hand. So it's always very important to me to be able to do something with a pencil and a piece of paper in order to really understand where you're coming from. So some of the things I want to talk about today, I want to give you a little background on Tyson Foods and what we are doing here in China right now. I want to talk a little bit about supply chain risk analysis and integration, as well as building quality into supply chain and operations. I'll go a little bit into transportation and logistics integrity, and then finish up with some key points and takeaways. So to give you a little background on Tyson Foods was founded in 1935. It's headquartered in Springdale, Arkansas, and we're one of the largest processors and marketers of chicken, beef, and pork products. Food safety and quality assurance culture is really one of our core values. It's something that is very, very important to us. It's something that our CEO, Donnie Smith, talks about regularly and how important it is, not only in what we do in America, but what we do in every country that we operate in. And then, we are very dedicated to innovation and R&D. In 2007, we built a brand new discovery center, which also helps us in some of the products that we innovate for the other markets that we operate in. So the three categories that we do in China, we do raise and slaughter, where we do chicken, beef, and pork. In our international businesses, we mainly focus on poultry operations, and that's what we do in China. We produce meat products, but then we also do some other tortillas. We do some cheese products. We do some other products. We sell in retail with the Tyson brand, but we also do a lot of sales which are B2B. We do a lot of sales with into industrial customers and these kinds of markets. Our brand is estimated at about $2 billion US. So we operate 3 locations in China. One is the Jiangsu, the Tyson Nantong complex. This is a fully integrated poultry complex. Now that means that we have the growing operations, the feed mill, we have the slaughter facility, and the packaging and the shipping out to the customers. So it's a fully integrated, vertically integrated process. Our Tyson Ridge Owl complex is also a fully integrated slaughter complex, and we do many of the same customers and many of the same products out of that complex. And this is located up in Shandong province. And then finally, we have a Tyson Dalong complex, which is more of it's a further processed. So we do chicken patties, we do chicken nuggets, we'll do strips, these kinds of things that you might buy at some of your local fast food restaurants. Okay. I want to go a little bit into the food safety maturity model, okay, because I think that this is very relevant to a lot of the industries that I work in and a lot of the markets that I work in. And I don't think that any one market, despite what a lot of people say, I don't think there's any one market who's got a lock on the enlightened and internalized. I think that every market has at least a percentage who are still up in the doubtful, and it just depends on where you are in there. But I want to walk through these a little bit. Doubtful. So the maturity model goes like this. You have a company where your management is doubtful, and this is when a problem happens, the response is, who screwed up? Okay, who made this decision and where's the problem? Okay, and so this is more of a person to blame type of culture. Okay, then you move into aware. Okay, and this is where they understand the need, but they're still very skeptical about how much time this is going to take, how many resources this is going to take, and can we just move this off to our suppliers? Do we really need to be worried about this, or can we push this responsibility off to our suppliers and just tell them we're gonna give you a spec and we'll check according to the spec, and then if you mess up, it's really up to you. Then you move on to knowing. Knowing is you really start to understand that you have responsibility for these problems, and people really want to be involved, and they want to, but it turns out to be a very reactive process. Okay, this is the process where you're in this stage when you are collecting lots and lots of data every day, but that data goes into a drawer. Okay, and then when there's a problem, you run over to that drawer, you start digging through it, and you start to try to find out which documents you need, and you bring them out, and you really, that data for 99% of the data that you're collecting, it sits in a drawer and collects dust. Okay. Then we move on to enlightened. This goes beyond firefighting, where you start to use the data that you've been collecting that starts to collect dust, and this is when you start getting into these the higher tech systems that can really support your business. And then you move into internalized. And internalized is where you want to be when you have that management commitment. It's where you are dedicating your time, your resources, and especially during budget time, your strategy, your business strategy is focused around this, this integrated and internalized food safety and solid supply chain model. So some of the things that are very important to Tyson, and some of the things that I find to be very common with some of the companies that we supply to and some of our suppliers, is most of them have some sort of vision and mission around their food safety and their supply chain and how that integrates with each other. Okay. So and these need to be written out. Okay. These are statements which really clearly give what you intend to do in the market that you're operating in. And then your management commitment around these statements. Okay, we participate with GFSI like Eva just mentioned, and one of the things that's very consistent between all of the schemes that they approve is they have a section in all of those audits that says does the company show the management commitment to their food safety. This is a very key and critical point of any of these food safety supply chain systems. And I've thought of a story about commitment. Okay, I remember when I was growing up, and my father took us over to Germany at one point. And this was back in 1988 when it was still divided between East and West Germany. And we went into Berlin, and Berlin at that time was divided between East and West Berlin, and there was a big wall that ran between. Many of you are familiar with this. And we went on a tour, and we were looking around, and the tour guide was showing us, as we drove kind of along the wall, we started noticing many of the buildings were empty along the wall. All of them were black. They didn't have any lights in the windows. There was no people in there, and you could see it very clearly. And he pointed this out, and he said, you know, the reason all of these buildings are empty is because as soon as somebody tries to, or as soon as somebody makes a successful or even attempts to move from East to West Germany from one of these locations, the whole location is shut down. They won't let anybody else in there. They lock up the building and they stop it, okay? And that was commitment. That is the commitment from that leadership to never let that happen again, okay? That was my first experience to understand that when you are committed to something, when it's important to you, you'll make it happen no matter what. So this is a model. This is something like we use. This isn't specific to us, but our systems are based on this type of program where you have a mapping. So you'll run to integrate your two processes. You'll have a line of risk, which is the top along here. Okay, so you go and you identify any of the risks that are in your supply chain. So these can, you know, this is a very generic model that I've used, but you can really tailor this to your own system to start identifying those areas where you really need to put your commitment and your resources. Okay, so, you know, for example, some of ours are, you know, on this, for example, you've got the, you know, you've got your, whereas the regulatory risk, which is right here, okay? And so as you can see, this is going to really impact your globalization and outsourcing, as well as your returns management, which are both very important to our commitment to regulatory and food safety. So as you go through and you start mapping your own system out and you start putting your own supply chain process into place, management process into place, and you begin to start understanding that the finished product that you're producing is really based on the quality of the ingredients that you're getting in the first place. Now, then you can start highlighting those red areas where you believe you need to put your resources and most of your time. And then you can start mapping out your process. And when you start mapping out your process, you can really start to discover some of the magnitude of some of these suppliers into your supply chain. So maybe something that is only a very small quantity used, but it's used in many, many different products. So a small issue in one of those where you have an adulterant, a chemical residue problem, can very quickly impact just about every product that you produce. It would be something like if we were in our live production model with our live birds. We have a very high level of control. We in our farms, we control the birds. The birds are our inventory. We control the feed that they use. We produce the feed, and we also control any medicines and vaccines that are used in the process. We purchase those and we supply those to the farms as they're used. This is more of a U.S. model of contract farming rather than a local model. And then we also operate our own farms, our own company-owned farms. Now, something that's very small might be a mislabeled chemical or antibiotic that was used on our farm. Now, this can have a huge magnitude of impact throughout our business. So this is why something like this is very tightly controlled in our process, because we've identified that as something which would impact us quite a lot. So these suppliers, we tend to use only suppliers that are our global suppliers and we have a long-term relationship with. And once you start to map it out, you can start to see how this impacts your products across your product lines, across your operations, and then you can start accounting for multiple ingredients, and you can account for multiple tiers of suppliers. Okay, so you can really start getting getting down deeper into your supply chain. So if we buy ingredients from a company, we also know that that company is buying ingredients from other people. So now we have to start going deeper into them and finding out where their supply is coming from. And that's when you start moving into the second, third, and fourth suppliers as these go in here. And you can start to see where these start getting, you start getting into very, very high magnitude products. So a small problem here will have impact all the way through your supply chain. Oops. Okay, so I wanted to cover these two levels of risk mitigation. And these are more philosophical, these are more strategic. And I bring this up because I do a lot of work with some of our suppliers, and I find them on this. A lot of the companies that I work with, I find them at this level right here, which is the sample and test to compliance. Okay, this is where they run their process through, and when the product comes out at the end, they do a test on that, and if it passes the test, then it's green lighted. If it fails that test, it goes on hold and may go into another market channel. Obviously, or that it's very clear. You can set up very clear stop-go metrics at the end of this process. Okay, it's very easy to understand and it's easy to audit. Okay, and it's very objective. Okay, there's not a lot of gray area in it, and you can also do it from supplier to supplier. Okay, they're all going to have basically very little change, so you can understand very clearly how their system works in this system. Okay, but there's some opportunities here, because one of the opportunities is you can only achieve a system, a level of quality, at the lowest side of your margin of error for sampling as an aggregate. Okay, so once you see if you have a system that has 5 to 6 steps in your process, you have to understand it's not only your level of error is not only any one of those steps, it's the aggregate of all of those steps, and that's going to be your margin of error for your process, which means that in a lot of cases you end up with a product at the end of your cycle where you could have a large volume that does not meet your criteria, and now you own products that you have to now downgrade or sell into another market or destroy. Okay. Some of the other issue is that the targets that you're using, these objective measures and these KPIs, may not have sound scientific backing. Okay, and so and it's very difficult to understand if I'm producing a plastic bag. Okay, if that's my process, and I'm just testing at the end, and I take a certain number of bags and I put some rocks in there and I seal it and I bang it upside down and see if that seal holds. I may not be doing that test in a way that my customer would be using that product, and I may not be doing that test in a way, I may not be doing the number or sampling size that would be statistically relevant to that. So you have to be very careful. And then also, if a lot of these tests, you can discover a problem very, very late into your process. Okay, so you may have produced 10 batches already where you've made an error in your sampling or in your testing that you didn't discover, and it's now affected maybe 5 days of production. So what we've tried to do in our system, and I feel like we've made a lot of progress here. We've started to integrate food safety and quality into our supply chain. Okay. Now the benefits of this are obvious. You have a faster response to problems, and you can really start moving very quickly if there's a problem, and you don't affect a lot of product. So you've got a greater control over your inventories, and you can be very proactive in your process. Okay, some of the opportunities there are, there's no one size fits all. Okay, so if I'm working with a supplier using an integrated system, it's going to be, many of my suppliers, depending on what they're producing, may have different places where they're checking depending on what the product is. So this creates a difficulty in my check system for that. It requires specialists for complex systems. Okay. These systems were all designed for specialists. They're not designed to have one-size-fits-all people in there. They've got to be specialized. So then your intercompany supply chains really have very difficult alignment, and then they're difficult to verify through audits. Right here, I just kind of went to show how these supply chain objectives and the food safety quality objectives meet each other. So, you know, your low inventory, you want to avoid this, which would go towards your low rejection due to expiration of shelf life, for example. And these are how your supply chain and your quality goals match up. And so you really want to take time to map these out and find out where you're strong. And then around your data, you want to make sure that you're measuring these data and bringing them back into your system, which is where, so some examples of this are some of your complaints, and then, for example, we do rejected flocks, and we measure this as a KPI in our system. And then you take that and you move that into your data gathering, your quality data gathering and supply planning. And then you can go through and you can work through these process steps when you're doing your weekly S&OP meetings to improve your process throughout. This is just very specific to us, and this is how these are the steps that we take, where we've included in our process the traceability, biosecurity, animal welfare, chemical control, farm sanitation, feed management. These are all things that we monitor and control very tightly within our process with our live operations. And then we also do that through the processing and through the further processing. And then with your cold chain logistics, the main point on this is you really just want to make sure that the steps that you're taking are very interactive with your third-party logistics company. You want to be using the data loggers in your GPS. If it's possible in your system, which means you need to integrate with your finished customers. You want to do monitoring and checks both at the beginning and when it's delivered out to your customer, and you want to integrate that with your customers' checks as well. Okay, so some of the key points and takeaways. You really want to start organizing your food safety and your supply chain around your company vision and mission. This is critical. If you don't have the management commitment, then you'll never be able to realize the benefits that you can get from these and produce a safe product. You need to build your quality metrics into your supply chain. The best way that we've found is to use the third-party approved auditors and schemes. We subscribe to GFSI, and I recommend that to everyone in the room to look into the China Food Safety Initiative, which we are a part of. This is something that I really believe in very strongly, and we support a great deal. You want to limit as much as possible your overlapping suppliers, and really you want to keep it as simple as possible. And so that brings me to the takeaway, which is one of my favorite quotes, which is from Albert Einstein: everything should be as simple as it can be, but not simpler. So I thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you for sharing world-class best practices, apply from a global company. I know very well Tyson Food. I visited, their headquarters, in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas. But I can assure you, what they have been developing for risk assessment, risk management, risk mitigation in a really tricky business, which is a meat one. What they have been doing is really outstanding. So. It's going to be time for the break, but I am sure that a few of you can have a question. Do you want to get more? There is one over there. Two questions. I'm going to give you. Yeah, the mic is coming. Thank you.
You started your presentation introducing your company about the great branding value. And I'd like to ask a question regarding your brand as how it's perceived in China. In the last 2-3 years, as you're well aware, in China, in the chicken business, there's more than one issue. There's the antibiotics, there's animal disease, there's a perception or misperception of the broilers. In the meantime, you guys have started your Case Ready program, taking your brand through retailers to consumers. How has that happened? How do you do more of that? How do the consumers buy in or not buy in with your branding promotion directly to consumers?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that question. It seems you're very knowledgeable about this, and I appreciate it. Well, we've started this promotion. We started to run our branded chicken products in the Case Ready, as he said. We've had a lot of very strong acceptance in the market. We have some of our strongest sales are in the retail markets for this fresh product that we do. So it's been a very, very successful campaign that we've been able to run. I want to make sure that I mention that we're not the only ones in China that can produce safe chicken. There's lots of there's several other poultry companies that do a very, very good job at producing very good chicken that's in compliance with regulation and very safe. Our branding that we've used, the strategy that we used, is primarily around our experience with the retail business in the United States. And so that's something that's very core to us. We understand that. We feel like we understand that very well. We feel like the branding in China, it's still very limited to the first-tier cities. But we would really like to expand that out and make sure that our brand is in every city in China one day.
There is another question over there.
Svinger, thank you for the presentation there. Jeff Goodwin from Glanbia. Just wondering, with the two methods of risk mitigation, rather than the sort of sample and test compliance method you were talking about, integrating it further in. I just wondering if you had a few more examples to help better understand the difference between the sample and test and that more integrated approach.
Okay, sure. Many of the integrated approaches that we've used, okay, so in processes or suppliers that you're not a major customer of, where you're only a smaller customer of that supply, you're going to be limited to a sample as you receive it kind of approach. Integrating it more would be much more into a process where you are more aligned with your customer. So, for example, one of our biggest customers globally is Walmart. Okay, we do a lot of business with them in the United States, in China, in Brazil, lots of countries. And we've been very lucky and successful in order to, for example, going through our supply chain and figuring out how they best use our products and how we serve them best. They've been very keen and open to our people actually going and standing on the receiving dock when they receive their product, so that we can do our own check as soon as it gets to their plant. So this is something that we actually go and take responsibility for, not only when it leaves our plant, because when it leaves the door of our plant, it's considered sold. But we don't leave it at that, because our brand is on that product, and it's right there with the Walmart brand in there. So we actually go and we will stand on that dock with the product to make sure that it actually gets in there. So that's another example. Does that answer your question?
That clarifies it, yeah.
Okay.
I got it. Thank you.
Thank you.